So just put it on the video. I don't know. Put some kind of a filter.
My name is Mary Hines.
I'm Ryan.
We get started now. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you here. My name is Ann Curzan, and I'm the Associate Dean for Humanities in the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. And it is just a privilege to be here and to get to do the first welcome. It is fabulous to see that we are standing room only with sitting on the sides, that all of you have come out to learn about and talk about this incredibly important topic. As you know, this is the first symposium in a series that is sponsored. It's the Carceral State Symposium series, and it's sponsored by, it's the first major undertaking by the University of Michigan Carceral State Project, which is an interdisciplinary collaboration, which is directed by Professor Heather Ann Thompson. And this project is committed to examining, to researching, and to doing advocacy work on issues related to mass incarceration, policing, and criminal justice. And I have to say that as the Associate Dean, when I scan the work that we do as a college, and I think about what is some of the most important work that we do, this is at the top of my list. When you think about how and where do we need to make a difference in the world, there just is nothing more important than this. And that you see the humanities and the social sciences stepping in along with community partners to say, how do we make a difference here? And I just can't stress enough, I think there is no more vital work that we could be doing. So this year, this symposium series will be digging deep into the meaning of the carceral state. And as you will see tonight and in all the future symposia, the speakers who are up here are, other than the chair, not university faculty. These are members of the community, members of communities impacted by the carceral state. And once again, I think it is so important that these are the voices at the table, and I want to thank all of you for making the time and sharing your wisdom and perspectives with us tonight. So tonight we're going to be thinking about the carceral state and the questions, as you know, why does it matter and what are we doing about it? And all of you are here because you believe it matters, and many of you are trying to do things about it. And tonight I think we're going to hear new ways of thinking about why it matters, which is why we're here, as well as new ways to think about what we do about it. So thank you for being here, and thank all of you for being here. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Ruby Tapia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Ruby Tapia. I'm an associate professor of English and Women's Studies here at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I'm moderating tonight's panel as part of the group of 5 faculty members and scholar activists here who were awarded a grant from our university's Humanities Collaboratory last winter to begin imagining what a new Center for the Study of the Carceral State at Michigan might look like. And what we mean by study is quite broad. Of course, study includes research, but it also encompasses the work and insights of community organizations, community-based institutions, activists, advocates, legal practitioners, volunteers, and people who have direct and varied experience with the criminal justice system. The other members of my group are my colleagues Amanda Alexander, who can't be here tonight, Ashley Lucas, Matt Lassiter, and Heather Thompson. Each member of our group will have their turns at moderating panels over the course of our Carceral State Project Symposium, which will span the course of this entire year, and they'll each introduce themselves at greater length when they moderate. But for now, I want to say that it's been a real honor to work with this group of smart, committed, accomplished colleagues who are doing crucial work addressing the historical and continuing injustices and violences of the carceral state in their creative, academic, pedagogical, advocacy, activist, and institution building work. They're an incredible group, so thank you for having me be part of you. Our grant supported several brainstorming and planning meetings, which led to a preliminary general proposal for a hypothetical Center for the Study of the Carceral State that we're continuing to work on. Our work led also to our identifying some key initial steps in conceptualizing such a center. One of those steps is that which we're beginning to take tonight, with the first in a series of several conversations that we'll facilitate throughout this year with key stakeholders represented by speakers on the panels and represented as well and especially importantly by the audience members, by all of you here. We want to make space within which to think expansively, capaciously, but also rigorously and in as informed a way as possible about the parameters of the carceral state. We want to collectively chart the work that the carceral state does and the work that we're doing and can do to resist the inequities and disruptions to community and to justice itself that characterize it. This panel asks, what is the carceral state? And toward that end, I'll offer that we can take for granted that the carceral state includes police, lawyers, court marshals, probation and parole officers, correctional officers, jail and prison administrators, and jails and prisons and detention centers themselves, including everyone employed and caged by them. So yes, the carceral state encompasses the formal institutions and operations and economies of the criminal justice system proper, but it also encompasses logics, ideologies, practices, and structures that invest in tangible and sometimes intangible ways in punitive orientations to difference, to poverty, to struggles for social justice, and to the crossers of constructed borders of all kinds. Like many of our national and international colleagues and collaborators have been doing for some time, we're here to expand understandings of the reach of the carceral state and of carcerality itself beyond widely held understandings of it as something that has only to do with mass incarceration. We want to host a range of conversations and illumine the institutional, political, cultural, and social spaces wherein punitive logics shape relations and outcomes, where the promise and threat of criminalization and the possibility/solution of incarceration organizes procedures, power, and populations. So many imagine that the prison is the central locus of these dynamics, that carcerality has only to do with cages, and that action and activism against these phenomena can take only very limited forms. This makes the problem elusive in materially consequential ways and inhibits us from imagining and charting paths toward effective change. We want to give symposium participants, panelists, and audience members the opportunity to explore with us the otherwise obscured reach of institutionalized carcerality, of the sometimes overt, often covert, promise of the prison as a substitute for humane solutions to so many social problems. We're very lucky that you all are here to kick off this series of urgent and substantive conversations. The 2018-19 Symposium, the Carceral State Symposium, is sponsored by the College of Ellison Office of the Dean, the Department of Afro-American and African Studies, the Department of History, the Crime and Justice minor, the Social Theory and Practice major, and the Prison Creative Arts Project at the Residential College. Also, the Eisenberg Institute for Historical Studies, the Institute for the Humanities, the Department of Political Science, and the Department of Sociology, and the Department of Women's Studies. We'd like to thank all of these units for their support and to thank also, of course, the Humanities Collaboratory, which made our planning possible. I want to thank, with a lot of gratitude and a lot of attention, Nora Kronitsky, who is a Michigan Mellon Humanities postdoc. Nora is right there. Who has done the lion's share of organizing the symposium and organizing us in our conversations. It's been incredible what you've done, and we're really grateful. Thank you, Nora. What we're going to do first is each introduce ourselves, and after we do that, I'm going to ask the same 3 questions of all of the panelists, keeping time as they answer so that we get through all of them and so that we hear from each panelist on each question. Now, I've given the panelists the questions ahead of time, so I haven't been that sort of cruel. And I've also let them know that they can feel free to choose not to answer any one of the questions if they don't want to. But there'll definitely be time for all of them to do that if they wish. And each speaker will keep all answers to 4 minutes or less. And I apologize in advance that I'll be helping panelists keep time with cards noting minutes left. And I will respectfully as I can, move on to the next panelist once 4 minutes have passed. So we'll get started with introductions and then get to our conversation. As I mentioned before, I'm an associate professor of English and Women's Studies here, and I'm connected to the symposium topic in a number of different ways. I've done research on the experiences of incarcerated women and co-edited a multidisciplinary volume treating these experiences a few years back. I've led workshops for young artists themed around the carceral state and co-curated exhibitions treating the experiences of incarcerated women and mothers. I've also facilitated writing workshops at Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility through the Prison Creative Arts Program, and I'm a member of the theory group Think Tank, which is comprised of inside and outside members at Macomb Correctional Facility for Men. I regularly teach courses on gender in the prison and literature, photography and film, and carceral visualities. My recent scholarship focuses specifically on the intersection of visual culture in the prison, and I'm writing a book right now on contemporary documentary photographic representations of the prison and incarcerated subjects. So I'll let the panelists introduce themselves just in the order in which they're sitting here.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Burton Harris. I am a defense attorney based out of Detroit, McCaskey Law. My practice is focused primarily in criminal defense and also family law. I spend a lot of time in Wayne County, Macomb County, Oakland County, and I do come out to Washtenaw County quite often.
Justin Alexander Gordon. I'm a storyteller, and I'm the quarterback of God Productions. God Productions is a theater, film, and music company. I just started my own company because when you got a felony, people don't give out jobs. I'm worth taking. And I'm here because I'm black. You really see it really in my face when I'm here. I ain't got to explain it, so I know what time it is. This is a serious situation, and I don't got to run down my credentials about why I'm up here on this panel, because you can look me in my eyes and tell me why I'm up here.
Good evening. My name is Ronald Simpson-Bey. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here among you today. I am the Director of Outreach and Alumni Engagement for JustLeadershipUSA, which is a national advocacy organization in New York City, committed to cut the national prison population in half by 2030. And what brings me to this panel, part of my backstory, I served 27 years in prison here in Michigan before my conviction was overturned in 2012 and I was subsequently released. So if I get any closer to the carceral state, it's going to kill me. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Heinen McPherson. I am the co-founder, and I was the first PCAPper of the Prison Creative Arts Project. When Buzz came in the door 29 years ago, I was standing there. And I'm currently training about 150 volunteers a year to work in prisons in Michigan and workshops in visual art, creative writing, drama, music, even photography, and it's been a pleasure to be here. I also served just about as much time as Ron, and I've been home now 16 years, and I'm very happy this is kicking off because there's a whole lot of people that need our help.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the first question that I've asked the panelists to prepare answers to is, please discuss one case, event, encounter, or experience that illustrates the importance of the specific work that you do.
I've thought about this all week, and it's hard for me to pick just one case. All of my cases become personal to me because real people are attached to them. And it's impossible to truly advocate for someone without becoming a distant family member of them and their family members. And it's hard to not care about the person behind the case. And most of my cases, quite frankly, and it sounds maybe cliche, but it's very true. Most of my clients are not guilty of what they've been charged with. They're not the monsters that this system paints them as. They're not the number and the words and the elements of the statute of the crime they've been charged. For instance, a case that is near and dear to my heart, my client's name was Sawatu Salamara, and she was a 26-year-old pregnant mother on trial, accused of assaulting a woman and her daughter. And that woman and her daughter were attempting to run my client and her family over with a car. My client pulled a gun out and attempted to protect herself, her 2-year-old child who was in danger, and her mother, who was over the age of 65 and in danger. My client was a very well-respected member of the community, did a lot of work in environmental justice. Not at all someone that would have ever imagined being caught up in a system such as she is now. She's currently about 15 minutes from here in Huron Valley, serving a 2-year sentence after a jury found her guilty of felonious assault and felony firearm. You may ask, well, how did she end up charged if she pulled out a gun in self-defense? Well, it's very simple. In this system, whoever gets to the phone first, that's the person who wins. It's very simple. If you make it to the police second, your story is never investigated. If you make it to the police second, you are always and forever looked at as the accused, someone who did something wrong, someone who has to defend their innocence, not someone who is innocent until proven guilty. And so that case for me, it was a life changer. I have not looked at this system differently, or I have not looked at the system the same since that case. Everything that could have gone wrong, it went wrong. The complaining witness gave 5 different versions of the story. The complaining witness is the person who lets the police know that something happened and they want charges to be filed. The judge during the trial allowed things to come in that should not have. Things that should have come in, he did not allow to come in. And so from the very beginning, my client was facing an uphill battle. And she was ultimately found guilty. She has maintained her innocence. The community has supported her in maintaining her innocence. She's had people from our governor's office. She's had people from the state legislature advocate for her. But it hasn't worked. All because she didn't get to the police first. So that's one of the most important cases for me because it's a very clear picture of what this system looks like. You can be accused of a crime. It does not matter who you are.
That is the timer, which shouldn't be doing
It was
that.
the end of my sentence, thankfully.
Well, then I'm not as sorry as I should be. Thank you very much. So, Justin, same question.
We got a real callousness in how we deal with people in this country, especially people that has been, that's a felon or might have been in jail, prison, probation, whatsoever. October 2017, my mama called me frantic. I'm up here in school. She's talking about, boy, what you done did again? So Westland police apparently caught somebody stealing cigarettes, using a credit card to go, to fraud, a fraud situation. He was light-skinned, all black people look alike, right? Yeah, that's what the police thought too. So because they used my name, I lost my credit card, lost my ID. So the person picked up my ID like a scammer does. It's a common crime. So he used my ID, got him a fake credit card, and went to buy some stuff. Real simple. He probably was poor. I understand. So Westland called me. They're like, yeah, you've committed a crime. You got a warrant out for your arrest. So I do the right thing. I do the American right thing. You feel me? I go up there. I go to Westland myself. I know I was in Ann Arbor while the crime happened. You feel me? So, okay, cool. I slide up to Westland. I get there. I'm like, hey, I've been, I got a warrant out. I wasn't even in the same city. I just want to go ahead and clear my name. Is there somebody I can talk to? Can we get this together? Lady looked at me and said, oh yeah, sure. You got pants on? I said, no, I don't got pants on. Oh, okay, well, you go back and get some pants. You come on for this arraignment. So, I'm not the smartest cookie in the cookie jar. So I didn't quite know what arraignment meant at first, and I bet some of y'all don't either. So I'm like, but that word just sounded bad. It ain't say come on and get this solved. You feel me? So I'm like, okay. So I call my lawyer friend up. You know, I'm like, hey, what that mean? She said, bro, they got to arrest your ass. You about to go to jail. You're gonna have to post bail today. Leave immediately. So like that's the callousness. Because I already had a felony, and because I'm black, automatically, oh, he did it, and he light skinned. The dude on the picture light skinned. Dude in the camera light skinned. He light skinned. We got him. Case closed. We're done. Let's go arrest him. So that's one situation. And guess who my lawyer was for that case? Anybody take a guess? Who want to guess? That's how God works. That's how God works. You in the right place tonight. Real quick. 2016, real fast. I know I talk quick, so I know I can get my stories out quick. 2016, I first came home from jail. I did 3 months. I've been 5-year probation and a felony probation. I did 3 months in jail. You feel me? You know. I came home. I was on 6 Mile. I'm from 6 Mile. I'm riding down Fillmore with my girl. I'm feeling good. You know, I did a lot of push-ups, so I'm feeling good. I hop out the car. My man's like, hey, Justin, he just got out of jail. He just got out of jail. He was excited. Like he was saying his man's. I didn't even know. He was locked up, bro. He was locked up. He was excited. Like, he was like, you know, that's a rite of passage where I'm from. Because it's a slave mentality and it's converted to prison. But look here, I done got 2 degrees, got 3.5s on both of them. And the same dude never got excited about that. You feel me? When I get out of jail, oh, what up, let's smoke, let's drink, what up, baby? When I get a degree, okay, that's cool, cuz. I see you working on that positive shit, huh? Oh yeah, that's what's up. Yeah. So that's what those stories like that. I can sit here. We can talk all day. Stories like that is why I'm up here and why I've committed my life to doing what I do.
As far as a story or a situation that resonates with me, I guess my own personal story does. Like I said earlier, in 1985, I was arrested and charged with assault with intent to commit murder in Flint, Michigan, involved in a shooting of a Flint police officer. I was not at the scene when it happened, and the prosecutor knew I wasn't at the scene when it happened. Yet they prosecuted me and 3 other guys that were with me. I ended up being convicted, received a 50-year sentence, and sent off to prison. 27 years later, my case was overturned for prosecutor misconduct. Because of the misconduct in the prosecutor's office, I was subsequently released. And during that time, while I was in prison, I mean, you know, I don't wish prison on my own worst enemy. Prison is not a place for humans to be. It's an inhumane place. And after I had been in prison about 15 or 16 years, I had 4 children, a son and 3 daughters. My oldest son was like 21 years old, and it was Father's Day, 2001. And my son, I talked to him that day, he said, hey, Dad, I'm bringing the girls up, we're gonna come visit. And you know, when you're in prison, a visit from your loved ones is like, you know, the most cherished thing you can have. And so I'm waiting. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, count time comes, no visit. So I get on the phone, and I start calling home, and I end up finding out. I called my ex-mother-in-law. She said, hey, you haven't heard? I said, what's going on? Where the kids at? She said, little Ronnie been shot and killed. My 21-year-old son had been shot and killed by a 14-year-old juvenile in the streets of Flint, Michigan. And you know, the pain of that, I can't even begin to tell you the pain that I felt by not being there for my child when he was murdered. But being someone that had been in the system and experienced what I had experienced, I did not want to see that child be treated the way I see people treated in prison. So I advocated for him to be treated as a juvenile instead of as an adult. In Michigan, they give juveniles life without parole for murder, and I did not want to see that child in prison for the rest of his natural life. It was not going to bring my son back. It was not going to do anything but destroy his family and further erode the fabric of our community. So I advocated for that child to be treated as a child, and the court finally agreed. They gave him like 7 years. He turned 21 in the juvenile system, and they subsequently released him. And so fast forward, and the work that I do now with JustLeadershipUSA, we are committed to cutting the national prison population in half by 2030. And we believe that those closer to the problem are closer to the solution, but they're furthest away from opportunities, powers, and resources.
Come on.
And so we are seeking to bring the directly impacted community and closer to the resources to help to make them productive citizens and to lead this discussion on decarceration in America. At Just Leadership, we run a leadership development program for formerly incarcerated people. And we also have an advocacy wing. We shut down several jails and prisons around the country, and we have a huge membership program. We have like a 3-legged stool on which we base our mission to decarcerate America. And I know a lot of people in the community are doing like lifetime probation and parole, which is excessive, these excessive sentences that we see. And so we seek to change the policy around the country on how they deal with corrections and reform, and how we even talk about corrections and reform in our community. We seek to stop using words that otherize people, ex-felons and convicts, and we use people first language, formerly incarcerated people, returning citizens, incarcerated people. Because we should not take on labels that denigrate and are derogatory toward people. So anytime you talk about an impacted person, call them either formerly incarcerated, a returning citizen, or incarcerated person. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry.
The Vietnam War ended April 15th of 1975. 6 months later, I was arrested and I was sent to the Detroit House of Corrections when I was 21 years old. And I was a very young 21 years old. The population at DeHoco, the old Detroit House of Corrections at that time, was about 158. When it closed, that's what we transferred with, 158. While I was there, the situation was so decrepit and foul, and we had so many constitutional violations that we filed the case called Glover versus Johnson, and it was brought on behalf of all women prisoners, past, present, and future of the state of Michigan. The case went to trial, and we won everything, and we won it because the director of the Department of Corrections took the stand and attested to our veracity and said everything that we had testified to was exactly correct. I used to call my Uncle Perry. It was Perry Johnson. That was a real critical time, and it was critical because we were about to be transferred to the new Huron Valley Women's Facility at 3511 Bemis Road. We transferred with 158. The day it opened, it was overcrowded. Almost immediately, they started sending prisoners from everywhere, from the county jails and people that had been held pending the opening of the new women's prison. Within a week, the population was close to 400. They had people packed in trailers. Right now, that same prison, which has undergone 2 different names and 3 or 4 different administrations and openings and closings, has over 2,100 women who are suffering the most severe consequences of prolonged incarceration with overcrowding, lack of medical care, decrepit, absolutely putrid food, waiting lists for everything, for a job, for workshops, for any kind of health, including mental treatment. The criminalization of the women who are mentally ill and who have suffered really severe consequences of being ill, I can't even tell you how bad that is. I've known thousands and thousands of women over the years, and I can tell you almost everybody I knew had some kind of a sexual assault or assault history, and they had had it for a long time, and they had had it when they were young, they had had it in the prison, they had it when they were released. It's a very dire situation with women in prison, and they are now in the press right now trying to fight for a class action lawsuit now about the decrepit conditions. And a woman won on one issue, which was she had the right to be free from a predator that was in her cell that had raped her, apparently. Of course, we believe the women. If the women said it happened, it happened. And that was a real serious situation in court as well, because the department's defense was, oh, well, that didn't happen. We're liars. We're manipulators. Well, how do you explain babies? How do you explain pregnancy? How do you explain some of the prima facie evidence that we had and that that we could prove? So to me, the case is the same case that we have fought all these long years, which is to try and alleviate the overcrowding conditions, give humane treatment to women and men prisoners, and provide an education and a way for them to be able to deal with the horrible conditions of confinement and not suffer. There's so many prisoners that have been tortured to death. Imagine it. You're less than 5 miles from all those women in the backyard, and you don't know what's going on back there. And you don't know because the malignant carceral state is, by and large, indivisible. You can't see it. You don't know what's going on back there because they've blocked access to the mail, to the phones, to the visits, to your money. You have no way of being able to communicate with the world what is happening to you and what is happening to your sisters and your family inside. So for us to talk about the carceral state now is critically important because they cannot get the word out to you about what is happening. And that is the kind of information that is so critical that comes from those of us that are formerly incarcerated that can relate to you exactly what the situation is.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. The next question, which is very relevant to what Mary was talking about, is how does your work help us understand that the carceral state entails more than mass incarceration, more than the obscenely large percentage of people behind bars in the United States?
My business card reads attorney and counselor. In many days, I'm more of a counselor than an attorney. And I don't have a degree in counseling. I don't have a certification given to me by the state. But what I mean is my clients and their families are traumatized when I come into their lives. Nobody calls me and says, I'm having a great day, how are you? Most people call me and say, you won't believe what just happened to me, or they're in tears. And they can only tell me the little information they've been told that comes to their home on a postcard that notifies them of a criminal warrant that's out for their arrest. Quite frankly, most of my clients in Wayne County, they don't even get a courtesy notification. They get someone coming to knock at mama's door, coming to knock at aunt's door, coming to your job. You get pulled over for speeding and you're notified of a warrant. That's how my clients are notified that they are about to be eaten alive and tangled up in a system that they're like a hamster on a wheel and they will not get out. When they think they're out, they're on probation. Or when they think they're out, they are tasked with paying fees that they just cannot afford after paying for a legal defense to get out of the system. And if you don't pay the fees, then you go right back into the system. So I deal with, on a daily basis, mothers and fathers who are in tears, grandmothers who are confused. I deal with employers who don't understand where their employee is, why they can't come back on a bond. I deal with all of that. For me, it's not just helping you get out of this legal system. It's about making you whole again. And quite frankly, you'll never be whole again because you'll never be the same. If you go into a cage for one day, you're different for the rest of your life. I had a client tell me he was in the county jail for 12 hours. They stole his dirty Nike socks. They were filthy. The white socks were gray, brown. And he couldn't believe it. And he says, I don't belong in here. And my response was, nobody does. Nobody does. You are no better than anyone else who gets locked away in those cages. And the people who are locked away, they have families, they have mothers. Some of them don't ever see their parents again before they get out. Some of them don't see their children before they can come home. And when they come home, they are so damaged. When you're in prison, you have to survive. And that survival looks a lot different on the inside than it does on the outside. And once you have that mentality ingrained in you from being in that cage, when you come back home, that mentality doesn't disappear. And so when this state puts a human being in a cage and they're treated like an animal, oftentimes an animal is what comes back out. And that's the person that this state expects to operate as a contributing citizen in our society. And it doesn't happen. They're traumatized, they can't find jobs, and they are on survival mode. They oftentimes commit more crimes simply in an attempt to survive. And we don't understand that. We as a society, we tend to judge that. And we think that, oh, well, if you do that, you're the type of person who should be placed in a cage away from the good people. No. My job is to try to humanize my clients. I don't call my client defendant in the courtroom. That's not who they are. They're Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith. They're a mother, they're a wife, a husband, and I need the judge and the jury to see them as who they really are. I could go on and on and on about the things that I do on a daily basis to help combat this system, but every day looks different, and I don't want to keep you up here long. Just know that being a defense attorney, it's not a 9-to-5, and it's certainly not what you think it is on television. I don't spend most of my time in the courtroom. I'm in my car. I'm in my car. I've had to help clients move out of homes in an attempt to find safety from the true victim, or they're the true victim in a case, but their accuser is out free, and they're out on bond terrified. I've had to get on the phone and look for jobs for folks so that my client does not go back into a cage while out on bond because they lost their job, or get violated for probation because they lost a job. The work is so very important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason why I'm here is because apparently y'all won't listen to John, y'all won't listen to Steve, y'all won't listen to Xavier. And these are just young black and brown people. Y'all won't listen to them unless they rapping about killing you, selling drugs, having sex with your wife, being gangsters, fighting. Y'all won't listen to people that look like me that's my age unless they rapping. So that's why I'm up here. Somehow I'm ordained by God. I'm ordained by Allah. That's why I'm up here. So, because it seems like the only way that we can get to you people if we shoot somebody. Y'all only hear about us on the news. Or we playing basketball, or football, or we in a movie. We entertaining y'all, we dancing. So that's why I'm up here. Because my work, that's why I started my own production company. I couldn't get, I got a job offer from the NFL to make $60,000 right out of school to do work, like to write, to do sweet stuff. Yeah, you know. But they denied me. I went through 3 rounds of interviews. I got the job. They flew me out. Got the job. Signed the contract. They threw it to HR. HR said, "Boy, get out of here. You can't work here. You can't be poor, black, and from Detroit with a felony trying to work at the NFL." I know we don't like people like that. Look, that's why I'm up here. So I love to be quiet and go back doing what I'm doing. I'm supposed to be in the studio today, but I had to come up here and tell y'all, why don't y'all listen to us? Why don't y'all listen to young black and brown people until it happens, or even poor white kids? Y'all don't want to listen to nobody until they make you listen, until they break in your house because they ain't got no food. Or until they sell your kids drugs, now it's an opioid problem in Michigan. You feel me? Like, that's why I'm up here. Because y'all don't listen. Y'all don't care. Y'all don't care until somebody do something to y'all and make y'all care.
The question was asked, how does my work help us understand that the carceral state entails more than mass incarceration? And I think I have a couple of points to make here. Part of our work, I talked about jail closures. We have like 3 major campaigns going right now closing jails. Our most famous one, or our milestone we call, is Close Rikers Island. Rikers Island is a notorious jail in New York City in the East River. And we're closing Rikers. We have 2 more campaigns going, close the Creek in Philadelphia and close the detention center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the work on Close the Creek and MSD will drive to overhaul probation and parole laws. Currently, there are about 7 million people under correctional control in the United States, and 5 million are on probation and parole. There are others who are not even captured in these numbers, who are on pretrial release under electronic monitoring or some other handed supervision mechanism. And the electronic monitoring is something that's real dangerous, and people think it's an alternative to incarceration, and it's not. because all it does, it expands the carceral state. It makes it virtual prisons. Because when they put those ankle monitors and electronic bracelets on your loved ones, and they come into your community, they're not monitoring just them, they're monitoring their family, everything that goes on in the community. And so we are fighting against electronic monitoring as much as we can. Another aspect is our jail closure work is centered on building communities, because we know that criminal justice system not only creates but also exploits the harm that exists in over-policed and underfunded communities. We know that the impacts and drivers of this system exist outside of the brick and mortar confines of the carceral facilities. We have another campaign called Working Futures, which seeks to relieve collateral consequences of being incarcerated. And it focuses on eradicating the barriers that formerly incarcerated people must confront. This campaign represents a deep understanding that the criminal justice system almost relies on you being cyclically involved. In other words, it brings you down than it prevents you from ever getting back up, thereby keeping you trapped in the chains and cycles of incarceration. By looking at what prevents people from escaping the shadow of this system through community investment and barrier elimination, the work we do demonstrates the depth of the challenge of our mission of half by 2030, given this massive reach of the carceral system.
Do you remember the horror flick, The Blob? Remember how The Blob is this thing, right? It's alive and it moves and it does what it wants to do and goes where it wants to go, and then it gets you. That's the carceral state. That's exactly how it is. It's this thing that moves, and it goes over here if the law changes, and it goes over there to get you if that's what it wants to do. And it's insidious, and it's evil, and it's a nasty piece of work. That was described to me by my partner as the Blob. And over time, things would happen, like I'd hear something on the news and I'd think, that's the Blob. So I want you to realize how insidious and evil and conniving the Blob is. And it's not just science fiction. It's exactly what the carceral state is. 1 out of 32 of the entire population of the United States is now under some type of carceral control. 1 out of 32. 1/3 of the entire population of the United States now has an arrest record. That's heavy duty. Think about that for a minute. 1/3 of the entire population of the country has an arrest record. That's social and economic and political control on all of us by the powerful and the wealthy who want to benefit from us, from our bodies, from our labor, from our lives and our families, and take everything from us that they possibly can, because they're like vampires. They're like the Blob, you know. They want to take it. And that's become so clear just in the last few months with the situation with the poor children and the families that were separated at the border. Yeah. How were they able to do that so fast, you might ask? Well, they had been working on it all along. They had been steadily buying private prisons, and they had been steadily working on putting all those bucks in their pocket and just laying it out and saying, yeah, we'll do prison reform with y'all, because we're getting ready to lock up these guys over there, the Blob. So the idea that all of us, the entire democracy is at threat right now and can be taken over by the Blob is really real. It's, to me, I mean, in my deepest, darkest thoughts, I think of it as fascism. I mean, how were they able to do what they did in Germany that fast? They did it with a series of laws, and law by law by law by law. They put it together until the torture in the backyard and the smoke was part of the landscape of their world. And that's exactly what's happening now. And I'm delighted to be able to, discuss this with other formerly incarcerated people and with you to highlight and work on actual solutions of what our response to that is going to be.
Thank you, Mary. That leads really well into the final question, which I asked you all to consider. Just from your perspective, how can resources here at the University of Michigan be used to understand and address the social justice issues on which you work? Is there research that you feel really needs to be done? Are there specific courses that should be taught? How can students become involved with the work that you do or similar projects? And what would you hope that a center devoted to the study of the carceral state would work on? What would it be? What would it do?
I might be in the minority here, but quite frankly, we don't need more research. The truth is out there. It's been out there. For the longest time, if you really wanted to know the truth, you had to go looking for it. But you don't have to even go look nowadays. You need to look in the mirror. You need to ask yourself, what am I doing to combat this? Ask yourself about your privilege. How does that affect things? What am I doing about my privilege? This is a very, very, very complex problem because, like Ron said, it's cyclical. You have poverty issues. You have housing and employment issues. Racism is embedded in the fabric of America, and that's where this problem starts. Until you get to the root and you can comfortably address the problem, you won't go far but a computer screen with your research. Whatever you uncover, it should make you so uncomfortable that you can't remain silent, that you can't sit there and do nothing but continue to read about this problem. You need to tell your colleagues, your friends, your family at Thanksgiving, you need to do the work. You don't need to look at numbers anymore. You need to use your mouth and stand on your feet and be loud. Anytime you find yourself silent, you have become a part of the problem. It does not matter what you know. It does not matter what you've researched. It does not matter how many talks you sit in. It does not matter how many buildings are erected. It does not matter what kind of programs are started in them. The people have to do the work. And it doesn't need to be people that are only affected by this. We have been doing the work. Black folks have been begging for folks to listen, to understand, to stop locking up our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers. You rip families apart when you put them in this system. And you don't just rip them apart, you rip the generations that come behind them apart. And that's a part of the cyclical problem. So again, I might be in the minority here, but I don't think that sitting in a building doing research is going to solve it. Get out on the streets, go to the prisons, see what I'm saying, see what all of us are saying, see what they've lived, smell the air. That's the research you need to do.
Thank you, Victoria. Our panelist, another panelist that was meant to join us from the beginning, but understandably got sort of stuck in traffic, I understand is actually here in the room. Monica. Monica, can you come up? Welcome. This is Monica Lewis-Patrick. We're going to get her a mic, and we're going to stop staring at her while that happens, and we're going to move on to the next respondent. But I'm going to have her join us and join the conversation. So, Justin.
Please, please, please stop coming to my city to take advantage of all the resources. Like y'all, people in Ann Arbor. Oh my God, I just read this article. The space between Ann Arbor and Detroit is shrinking. It's so much opportunistic growth. It's so many. It's all the businesses, the renter space is cheap, the housing is cheap. Stop getting all this money in my city, and then when we come up here, y'all ostracize us. Detroit, like when I bring my people up here, they don't even feel welcome. I don't even feel welcome. I've been going here for 5 years. Stop coming to my city. Stop coming to my city and just taking advantage because y'all know y'all can. Because that's how history has made it. So Detroit, of course, is sacred land. You know, it's international ground. We got islands. You know, we have access to pure the Great Lakes. Stop coming to my city and just getting money and getting rich and coming back here. But then when my people come up here, y'all act like we about to do something to y'all. Like, for example, it should have been a bus. Like, why is it all white people in the audience? We talking about jail. I mean, like what? I mean, that's cool. I want y'all to be here and listen. But dog, why it should? Michigan got a lot of money. It's like a $14 billion endowment. I'm probably shortchanging. Y'all should have took a bus and had some black people come up here that's going through it, so they can sit up here, because we ain't having these conversations enough in the neighborhood. We not having, because we ain't got time. When we get together, we want to smoke and chill. We want to relax because life is stressful. Y'all got the privilege to be up here and sit and listen, take notes and absorb. Yeah, like we want that privilege. We want to be able to sit and take notes and absorb. So put a situation up, man, with some 18 to 24-year-olds, some men and women. They can come up here and interact with some of these students. Is y'all scared? Is y'all scared? They gonna dilute, the population here? Is they gonna corrupt y'all precious students? Like put some real Detroit students, put some real Southwest, Northwest, East Side, West Side. Bring them up here. Say, look, we want more of the Detroit community up here, because y'all always coming down here, always coming to Detroit, cleaning up, starting businesses, buying up all the houses, and then flipping them so the people that live in that neighborhood can't live there no more. Y'all getting rich? How much money do y'all want? How much more money do y'all want? How much more money can y'all spend? Let us come up here and get some of the money. And maybe some, I'm not gonna say the crime will go down. I don't know. I can't speak on that. But dang, like, why do I feel ostracized when I come up here? Why do my people feel ostracized? My cousin just told me today. He said, man, when I got outside, I put some mouthwash in my mouth. People was looking at me crazy. Like, he just got out the car. He was minding his own business. Like, why is there so many stories like that? Why y'all make people uncomfortable, but y'all want to go to their city and get all the money because y'all know it's an opportunity right now? Stop doing that. That's devilish. That's evil. That's not good. You're an opportunist in the worst way. Because when we come up here, we can't get nothing from y'all. Y'all want to act like we criminals. Stop doing that, for real.
As far, I think, the university, and I think I beg to differ with my colleague down here, I think research is necessary. I think research needs to be updated, because there is a lot of research out there, but the research is outdated because it doesn't include the voices of those directly impacted. The majority of the research out there is done by people that's basing their findings on theories and subjection instead of talking to the people that have actually lived experiences. The research should be centered around those that have gone through the prison system, that have suffered the abuses of the carceral state. Because, like I say, our motto of Just Leadership is those closer to the problem are closest to the solution. So if you talk to the people that's been part of the problem, you might come up with a reasonable solution. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. So we can't base our laws and our policy on old, outdated research. The research has to be updated. The university would do well to have focus groups with people that have been directly impacted, to have think tanks with people who have been directly impacted, have more symposiums, and create dialogue. Because the only way we're going to change the conversation around crime and punishment in Michigan and in America is for us to have these conversations. Instead of talking, at each other or around each other, we talk with each other. I don't feel like it's us versus them, but I think we all in this together. I think we're reaching a point in our nation's history where we see what the results of the original sin of slavery has brought. Come on. The sin of slavery is the back on which incarceration was built. So we have come to recognize that, and the research should continue to bear that out. We should not stop shouting that out, that it needs to be pointed out. So I hope that the university would take this as an opportunity to reach more deeply into the impacted community, to have these conversations and to create these results. Thank you.
This is a dream question for me. What would you like the university to do? What I would really like them to do is help us create an actual center, and create a center with bricks and mortars where we have exhibition space, where we have space for classrooms, where we have space for what we cannot get or achieve from the hallway of the Duderstadt Gallery while we're trying to have a little nibble and see the art show. I want a place where prisoner art can be collected, where prisoners can put on their plays, where prisoners can produce their books, where prisoners and newly freed people can meet and share their lives and their work together in one space. I mean, imagine this for a minute. Imagine the wealth of the historical knowledge of all of the photographs of prisoners in their lockers and in their duffel bags and in their trunks all across the entire United States. I mean, imagine the stories, imagine the history there. Imagine 200 years from now, there's a place, a beautiful place, a place with brick and mortar here, hopefully, where historians and people can look at what happened during this period of the new Jim Crow. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to our family, to our children and our grandchildren to be able to stop this madness and try to do something about it. And I think that events such as this, where we really think tank, where we don't just sit around and imagine all the horrors in perpetuity, where we actually consider the fact that we can do something about it and take steps forward. And I think that that needs to happen, and it needs to start here now.
Ashe. Well, peace and blessings, everyone. I'm Monica Lewis Patrick, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president and CEO of We the People of Detroit. My background is one where for over 20 years I served as a special ed teacher. I also managed 8 counties of Northeast Tennessee where children were having a psychiatric emergency. And I have a degree, a master's degree in criminal justice and public management. And what I know is that since the 1200s, Bacardi said that the only true deterrent to crime is education and employment. And so when you look at what has been the drivers in basically creating these layers of inequities and injustices, you have to factor that in along with institutional and structural racism. And what we know is that when you look at the inequities, and I'll just speak from my city, I heard the brother speak of Detroit, and I love to talk about Detroit. When you look at Detroit and the demographics of Detroit, what you'll find is that white flight was a major driver. And as white folks left the urban core, then what you found happening shortly after that is that you found middle and upper class black folks went running after them because there was this perception that the grass was greener, that the water was wetter. And so all that was left in the city was those that had stayed and paid and had nowhere else to go, or decided that there were still some diamonds in the rough in the city of Detroit. When you just look at water alone and how water has been weaponized for the last 50 years, we're a city that was legislated by the state of Michigan in 1955 to build out a system that now provides water to 3.8 million Michiganders. Half the state of Michigan gets its water from the city of Detroit. But now in the last 10 years, what you have seen is that the population of Detroit that stayed and paid can't drink from the very well that half the state of Michigan is drinking from. Hello. When you look at that, on top of that, when you layer that with the targeting that happened under the guise of emergency management. Hello. Emergency management within itself is unconstitutional. But it was allowed to stand after 83 counties out of 88 across the state of Michigan voted it down. And then the very corrupt and inhumane actions of the rogue side of the legislature, because I don't just blame the GOP, because Dems had a role in it too. And what they did is they strategically targeted Detroit, because the narrative is if we can do it in Detroit, we can do it anywhere else. Well, what we know is that these are some of the facts. I'm going to give you some recent history. Is that what you have seen in the last, since 2009, over 100,000 households were illegally foreclosed on. You can go to a website called illegalforeclosures.org and get all the data and the science. Illegally foreclosed on. What you know is that since up until 1997, Detroiters had the highest home ownership per capita in the country. So that meant that black folks had a history of paying water bills and light bills and taxes and doing their fair share. But the narrative for the last decade, couple of decades, ever since the era of the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young, has been this very racialized narrative that the last one out cut the lights off. And we ate that in Michigan. And it was all right if children in Detroit were failing because black folks didn't care anything about their children. That was the state message. Well, what I came to tell you, if you do your research, Detroiters have always voted for every millage to bond and fund education. But if you pull back the layers, some of the graduates of this very institution have conspired and collaborated to destroy a city that definitely had the right to be. And so they went in under the guise of correcting the financial mismanagement, and they stole property that had been in the hands of black folks for almost 50 years and some as much as 100. And we know in this country that for working class folks, your wealth is in your property. That's where you garner wealth. And so that's why you saw Detroit able to continue this upward gain and upward momentum in the middle of a financial downturn. And then when you look at the bankruptcy, because what we did is we leveraged poor folks and working folks' pensions in exchange to save art on the backs of the working class of this country. And what it said is that the law said that in Michigan, you're not supposed to be able to go and touch pensions. But we allowed it in Detroit. And so what happened is you set legal precedents for the rest of the country to be able to raid pension funds and annuities. And then when you didn't speak up for public education and you allowed the DeVosses to raid the coffers of this state as it relates to funding education, you created a direct pipeline to prison. And when you pull back the covers, what you'll find is many of the captains of industry across this great state that are heralded by most of this country are the biggest crooks you've ever seen. When you look at Dan Gilbert leveraging $617 million out of the school aid fund that was meant for the children of Detroit while they sit in buildings with mold and infestation and water they can't drink, we've already turned the clock back 50 years. We still have 2 water fountains, one where you can drink downtown in Midtown, and another where you can't even go down the street to Cass High School, which is one of the newest high schools in the city, and drink out the fountain. And what I came to do, because I just came through a hell of a traffic, because I don't come up here that often. As the brother said, it doesn't seem to be welcoming and inviting space. And at the same time, you know, we root for you at the football games. But at the same time, we talk about you like a dog in terms of your lack of leadership. I came a year and a half ago and spoke to some students that are in the School of Public Health. And what those students did, this is why you got to deputize yourselves. What those students did is they went to their professors and said, it doesn't feel good to know that the Flint water crisis was a man-made disaster. And our university is sitting silent because they are fearful of political reprisal. See, that's the same mindset that ushered in what we have now from the top to the bottom. Because I don't say we just have failed leadership at the federal level. You have it at every junction of the process. And so now where we are is that now you have generations of students in the city of Detroit that have been an experiment for the DeVosses to privatize public education. Well, let's talk about the DeVosses. They're deeply connected. And this is where your academics leaves out how to connect the dots. How you connect the dots is as you do your research, because I do research. But what I had to tell the academics is that sometimes when they won't believe the activists, they may believe the academics. But many times the academics don't even have a full analysis of what really is happening. So that's why when Global Health Initiative at Henry Ford wasn't speaking about water shutoffs creating public health outcomes, my organization went to them in 2015 and said, are you looking at waterborne diseases? And they said, no, we're not. But then as we looked at their staff numbers, 70% of their staff don't live in the city. So if they're not reading the free press and the news, they probably wouldn't know that there are water shutoffs. And then what happened is as I awakened them to the data and the statistics, because I use it as a weapon and a tool. Yes. My whole message is not in it, but it definitely has to be part of my arsenal. And what I found is that as I begin to educate them, their hearts and minds begin to turn, because many times they won't believe the stories, but they're really impassioned about the dollars and the cents and the stats. And when we gave them the stats, what they did is they laid 37,000 cases over top of data that activists had created and funded. And what that stat said is that if you live in the city of Detroit, you have a 150% probability of contracting a waterborne disease or infection because of the massive water shutoffs. So while they were telling you that black folks in Detroit were just being deadbeats, didn't want to pay their fair share, that racial narrative allows you to hide and do nothing. But what I'm telling you is if you come, just like we come up here to your ball games, and then you come to Detroit to the football and the basketball and the baseball games, well, the very people providing you your hot dog or pouring you your beer may not be able to afford to turn on their tap because we have decided that people that provide a good day's work don't deserve a fair wage. So I just laid out for you how education, how incarceration, how public health, how business, at least business when I knew it, used to be fair and cared about its customer. Now we have politicized corporations to the point where they have more rights than people. And what I know is that in the middle of this moment that we're in, we can decide, because my grandmother told me, she died at 98. And I said, oh, it would have been amazing to be part of the greatest generation. And she said, baby, let me tell you something. The greatest generation is who's ever left. Who's ever left? And then you decide, how do you proceed forward? But every generation must face the tyranny of their day. And you're facing it. Now the question is, what will you do about it? What will you do about it? Because this moment right here, our biggest fears are encroaching upon us. And they are inevitable if we do nothing. But if we do something, and if we decide that equity and justice will be our compass, then we don't have to live in the misery of the history of the past. We can truly live out the tenets of what we say this country will be. We have the ability. We have the ingenuity. You tell me on God's green earth, why is Flint still not fixed? When I'm sitting in one of the greatest engineering schools in the world. Right. And I'm going to pass the mic, but I want you to know this. If we don't make these moments part of a movement, then we're wasting our time. If we don't begin to speak up and speak out about injustice, and you may not do it the way I do. I'm a little straightforward, no chaser. But my mother told me something back in 2014. She said, shutting off water is an act of war. And the question for all of us is how much of this carnage are we willing to sit by and witness? I am determined in my lifetime that I will see the human right to water. I believe that water can unite us, and it can be that one place that raises our humanity so that we can address all of these other injustices. But it's all up to us. We must decide to be deputized.
Thank you, Monica. So that was appropriately the last word, official from the panel, but we have a lot of, responses? My mic. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. A lot of time strategically built in here for us to have a conversation between the audience and panelists, and we already have a hand, so yeah, Ashley is gonna.
And I'm going to bring you this mic. I ask that all people asking questions and making comments, please don't speak until you get the mic, both so that the audience can hear you and so that the live stream can hear you.
I have the unique privilege of both having been formerly incarcerated and having worked for 10 years at this university. So my question, before I ask the question, I want to challenge the university in one way. Right now, there's a private company that's trying to monopolize the business of providing education to people incarcerated. And they're charging a lot of money to people who can't afford it. This university should be providing education to every single person who wants it, who is incarcerated in the state. And we're live streaming this right now, and we have, I know for a fact that you all do online courses. So why aren't we disrupting that model that's charging the people who can afford it the least to have to spend money they don't have, that their families don't have, who are working in jails and prisons for 10 cents on the dollar? Why isn't this university, which I used to be proud to work for, doing more to provide educational opportunities for people inside?
I don't know if anybody on the panel wants to speak to that, but Ashley, I feel like that's a question that you might be able to speak to given the recent work that you've done, proposals along these lines, et cetera.
Sure, I'm honored to take a stab at answering this question. My name is Ashley Lucas. I'm a professor here in the Residential College at the Department of Theater and Drama. And I have been working with the wonderful Tim O'Brien, who you can't see right now because he's behind a camera, doing the live stream. But the two of us have been working on trying to talk the Michigan Department of Corrections and the University of Michigan into making all of the online course content that we have produced at this university available to everybody who wants it in the Michigan Department of Corrections.
Awesome.
We're running into, thank you, we're excited about that. So that's two kind of big institutional hurdles that we're trying to get through, the MDOC and the University of Michigan. The MDOC has told us on occasion that some of the courses that we'd like to offer are above the heads of people inside the prisons. And we don't believe that for a second. We think that people in prison are just as smart as everybody else, and that they should have the right to take courses in whatever subject they would like. So we beg you at the Michigan Department of Corrections to take seriously the intellect and talent of every person locked inside your walls. And we beg that of the University of Michigan as well. We are the largest flagship public university in the state of Michigan. We are one of the great land-grant research universities in the country, and we want to serve all the people of Michigan, particularly those who have access to the fewest resources. So back in the 1930s, up through 1994, we were offering credit to people in Michigan prisons. We've done the research, thank you, Nora Kunitsky, to dig up the incredible legacy of prison education at the University of Michigan. So I ask anybody with a connection in the admissions office to help me work through the hurdles of how we grant credit to folks inside the institutions, because they are the people of Michigan.
Right. That's right.
And that's who I came here to serve as a faculty member. And I ask my colleagues to please join me in doing this work, both in our online courses and in setting foot inside prisons, to really, as many of our panelists have called us to do, to interact with the people on a day-to-day basis, because they are our people.
That's
and
right.
we are here to serve them, I hope.
Hi, this is wonderful. I'm encouraged by your process. Right at the very beginning, when you gave the list of organizations within the university or pieces of the university that were contributing or involved, I noticed that the hospital and the education, medical education was not part of that. I was a prisoner rights advocate for 25 years. I worked for the American Friends Service Committee, which still has a program, very active. Natalie Holbrook is the director of that program. But while I was the director, one of the things we pushed for at the legislature, at the Department of Corrections, and at the universities, I sent letters to the universities, was to get the medical schools providing the needed medical care within the Department of Corrections. We have the University of Michigan, we have Michigan State University, we have Wayne State University that could be providing all kinds of wonderful medical care. We could be educating our interns in the prisons that have all kinds of diseases. And no one was willing to do anything back when we talked about it. And I am hoping that you would work with the medical school to get them involved in this whole process that you've got going, so that we can get decent medical care inside the prisons.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to share with you that one of the reasons we have you all here is that as folks who are working on, as folks who are working on this center, that's exactly what we are hoping to do, to connect with folks around the university. We've had some discussions with folks in the medical school, but also the School of Social Work, really across the university. So LS&A is very generously making this home where we start this, but we are absolutely looking for the kind of partnerships you're talking about, and that's why we're all here, is to really brainstorm and think about, if we do a center, and if we continue this project, which we're all committed to, what does it look like, both on the ground in cities, but also here at the university. So thank you for that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Heather Thompson. I'm in the Residential College, Department of African American Studies, and in the RC. Thank you.
When I say that we need to be outside of brick and mortar, be out in the community, be in the prisons, that's exactly what I meant. My client, Suwati, that I spoke to you all about earlier, she gave birth in prison.
Say it.
I stand corrected. She gave birth at a hospital. Prior to that, she was chained to a bed for an examination. And her baby was ripped from her arms 2 days after she gave birth. And she gave birth alone. And prior to her going in to give birth, she asked multiple times to be taken to the hospital. And the prison staff simply said, drink more water. Okay. That's why we need these partnerships. That's why we need to get away from these computer screens. That's why when Ron says he disagreed with me, I don't know if we really disagree. The research needs to be done, but in the community, with the people
That's right.
that it's so
That's right.
That's
right.
critical
That's
for
right.
change. That is so critical. I don't know why it hasn't happened. Huron Valley is right up the street.
That's right.
And I will be so disappointed if in a year we have more programming like this and we're saying the same thing.
That's right. That's right.
I started saying it 30 years ago.
That's so disappointing tonight.
But also just a word of caution as you're coming to community is that let's not come with this extractive model. Because as you're getting grant dollars and getting funded, making sure that people are treated in an equitable manner. Because I can tell you that, we've been studied to death in all of these communities that have been besieged with emergency management. 53% of the African American population of this state still is living with the remnants of emergency management. So the very systems that you're talking about changing, we're even struggling with participating from a citizenship perspective in the voting process. This is another thing that you've got to begin to look at, the gerrymandering that is actually allowing the system to leverage itself to be able to create this austerity. And so we need equity as we're coming to tables. You come to me, my time is valuable too. And I may not make 6 figures, honey, but I can tell you what I give to the community is more valuable than 6 figures. So respect that. So as you're talking about partnership has some equity in it, and it has an exchange. So it doesn't mean just extract from us our information and our pain. We also have some brilliance and some creativity that you're leveraging as well.
Is this on? I also want to say that I'm interested in wondering sort of systematically and out loud about what role the university can play in these issues and addressing these issues and addressing the dehumanizations that occur in carceral spaces without contributing to expanding the carceral state.
Yes.
So if we're wanting to enlist the resources of the university to address the problem, I think we need to think more expansively about the problem beyond what it is that the resources can do for incarcerated, disenfranchised individuals that's going to make the carceral system work better, right? I'm personally really averse to having this Center for the Carceral State be something that again makes that state bigger. So there's a tension here between necessary reforms. We are talking about dire conditions. Mary's absolutely right. and the conditions that she describes that characterize Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility apply to the prisons in Michigan on the whole. Real violences are happening inside, and we haven't yet talked about the ideologies and orientations that lead us to think that caging people is the solution.
That's right.
So we have to talk about that. We have to talk about restorative justice. We have to
Yes.
talk about the punitive logics that have us take for granted that what we need are more resources inside the prison. So again, I honor everything that's been said about expanding educational opportunities inside, about providing necessary health care and resources to people who are existing in the ways that they're existing inside, but we have to hold in tension those needs and those imperatives with a whole other conversation.
Has there been any conversation about, it's called the Miranda Project? And this project where there's a lot of funding going into it from the Koch brothers? And what the strategy is that like in a place like Detroit where you have Dan Gilbert using Eric Prince and Blackwater to train downtown security guards, and the police stand down for those security guards. And what the Miranda Project talks about is actually taking incarcerated persons and in exchange for their outside freedom, because they still would be considered incarcerated on paper. And they would become the policing of communities that they already see as throwaways. So say in Detroit, they would police neighborhoods that they just don't want to invest in anymore. And those persons would be allowed to use whatever methodologies, legal or unlegal, and then in exchange for that, all of your tax dollars that they consider valuable would only go for what they consider real policing. And so I just would caution too, as we're studying and researching, really digging down into where funding is coming from for this research. Because the Koch brothers are dumping money into universities all across the country to actually explore this new way of policing. And that too is connected to what you're talking about in terms of incarcerated persons.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Holbrook. I'm the director that Penny was talking about of the American Friends Service Committee. And I appreciate your comments about not expanding the carceral state while actually paying attention to the plight of people inside. In our program work, we hear from thousands of people in Michigan every year who are incarcerated in the state prison system here in Michigan. And we try to help them navigate that system and make sense of it and get the care that they might need in the here and now. And I am an abolitionist, but I'm also a pragmatist, and I know the system's not going away tomorrow. And I know that we have to be having conversations on punishment and how we shift out of a punishment frame. Most of our statutes in this state are punishment-based, right? The sentencing guidelines are punishment-based. That's part of the statute. And so these conversations are enormous. But we really have to be framing conversation around what it means to be safe in community and going to communities that experience a lot of violence, and how do we come up with alternatives to incarceration. And I'm going to plug my program because I'm super excited. And Ron helped with this. Ron used to work at AFSC. But we just published this Ending Perpetual Punishment. It's based on a film that we made in April 2017. It's people who did long time in prison got out, and we did a focus group and filmed it and made a little 11-minute movie. And we are trying to lift up stories of people who've done really well once they've gotten out of prison, or not even really well, but have just gotten by, and get their stories out there so people can hear them. And also the people who are still stuck inside, who are doing amazing time, and who do have those brilliant minds that can take those online courses and probably teach some of them also. So I think it's really important for us to talk about the cultural change work that has to happen out in communities in order to shift conversations around vengeance and punishment, and that's the history that we're addicted to it in this country. And until we start having different conversations about what we do when harm happens in our communities, we are going to be stuck with a punishment system. And also, we have to care for the people who are stuck there right now. We can't ignore them. So just wanting some better medical care for them or mental health care is important in the here and now. And we can talk, I think, like being in conversation about what our you know, abolitionist reforms versus reformist reforms, that kind of thing, without expanding the carceral state. So, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yehudia Findo-Buru. I'm a PhD student, and I recently finished a research project looking at the digital literacy skills of formerly incarcerated individuals. So my question for the Carceral Center is there any plans to bring like policymakers and wardens and correctional officers to this conversation to just make sure that all sides are being covered when we are talking about this topic?
Heather, do you want to take that one? If I bring that up?
Excuse me.
Thank you. I think that the answer is not going to feel very satisfying, but I'm hoping that it will be encouraging, which is to say that we are wide open. We are deeply, deeply interested in hearing from you and hearing from everybody about exactly what this should look like. And that's not to punt it. It's to say that we think that we would be remiss if we came to this group or any group and said, this is what it is, this is what we're going to do, this is who we're going to listen to, this is what we're going to talk about. And so instead, what we are doing is taking notes vigorously, taping this to really think about exactly that question. Who are the participants? What are the questions? How do we reframe questions? How do we imagine new solutions? And so I'm sorry that doesn't really answer your question, but it is to encourage you and everyone to keep asking those questions. What do you think this needs to do? What is the agenda? What can it do most effectively? And even pie in the sky stuff. What do we hope that it could do in 5 years, if not right now? So, thank you.
I can answer too. I was suggested to tell this story, so I'll at least tell a little bit about it to answer that question. So it's something we can do as far as changing the culture and inviting people. It's a man named Brian Mackey. Anybody familiar with that man?
Prosecutor.
That's the lead prosecuting attorney of this county y'all in right now. His office is walking distance from here. So back in like 2015, me and my cousin went to the gym, CCRB. I didn't have my M card. I was a student at the time. I didn't have my M card with me. So we went in, you know, and I'm telling you, I'm a student. You know, so they like, hey, you know, you gotta leave. I'm like, well, you know, I'm stuck. I was like taken aback that they was like so aggressive with me. They're like, hey, you gotta leave. You don't got an M card. You know, you're not a student here. I'm like, I'm telling them I'm a student. You know, like we like going back. Me and the staff, we're about my age. We going back and forth. You know, like I'm like, damn, I'm a student. Like you just gonna not believe me, like you know. And so and I'm like, all right, forget it. I'll just see you later. Like you know, I'll go get it. She took that. When I said I'll see you later, she said that as a threat. She called the police in less than 30 seconds. 4 police officers came up here. They threatened to beat me up. This is CCRB. This ain't like Detroit or this is Ann Arbor. You can walk over here. You know, this happened 3 years ago. They threatened to beat me up, arresting me, and that's set off a whole chain of negative things in my life. But I want to answer your question specifically is because that man called me a menace to society. He said I don't belong on this campus. Like Brian Mackey. Brian Mackey. His office is down the street. You can talk to him. Like, we got to start holding these people accountable. He wrote it in. My grandma told me I can sue him, but I'm still on probation, you feel me? So I'm not, you know, I don't know about suing the man when you're still under the man, you know, it's kind of tough. But like, yeah, in paper, that was slander, that was defamation of my character. He called me a menace to society. He said I didn't belong on this campus. I was a danger to the campus community. That's verbatim, ladies and gentlemen. That's Brian Mackey. So that's your question. Yeah, let's get Brian Mackey in here. Let's get some other people like that.
Hey guys, how are y'all? My name is Martise. I'm from Chicago, and I come from a family of formerly and currently incarcerated people. And I think that it's really awesome that all you guys are doing such great work in Detroit. Right now, I'm currently a 1L at the law school at Michigan, and
all right.
Hey, brother.
Yeah.
brother. And I think that in exploring organizations and the different opportunities to get into the city, I felt very uninspired by a lot of them, and I felt like they've been, in some instances, kind of shallow and don't really touch the community in a way that I want to. So I think that I would love to in some way or another, build a more continuous pipeline of communication between us and you all in Detroit. And I would love to, in the spirit of you guys saying, stop doing all the research all the time and actually get into the community. Here's some concrete ways that each of you think that we could make a better contribution to Detroit. And whether we're talking about incarceration or just the larger community. As someone from Chicago who knows a lot about the south side of Chicago but doesn't know much about Detroit as an transplant.
Same thing, baby. Same thing.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to let everybody know that whether or not you have any attachment to the University of Michigan, if you want to volunteer in a prison, come see me. The Prison Creative Arts Project does volunteer work every single week in prisons for adults and in youth facilities throughout the state of Michigan, and we always need more people to help us. So if you want to work with Mary Heinen, who's awesome, please come talk to us about how to volunteer in Michigan prisons.
Well, I also want to make sure that I reach out to you as part of We the People of Detroit, because a lot of the work that we're doing, they have now criminalized water shutoffs. So water shutoffs have gone from a misdemeanor to a felony. If you turn your water back on or if the person doesn't completely turn your water off, you can get a felony in Detroit. And that was sought by Prosecutor Kim Worthy, and that was sought by Gary Brown, who is the police officer that heads up the water department, which should be scary to all of you that get your water from Detroit, that the police is managing your water. But what I would say is that many of the issues in Chicago are the same issues that plague Detroit. Many of the operatives that have been a part of destroying public education in Chicago are some of the same operatives that operated in Detroit. And so there is not a separation in how these issues are playing out, and we need lawyers all the time. All the time.
I have 3 organizations I want you to write down, young man, and I am so proud of you.
Yes.
I am so proud of you. We need more young black men in law school. Write down the Detroit Justice Center under the leadership of Amanda, who also has a strong connection to the University of Michigan. Her last name is escaping me right now.
Alexander.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Desiree Ferguson is the executive director.
Yes.
The legal director. Write down the National Lawyers Guild Detroit/Michigan chapter. We are one of the legal arms that is behind the folks who are criminalized for shutting their water back on because they have an infant or a toddler that if they don't have running water, they will get deathly ill. Also write down the National Conference of Black Lawyers. And if you are available and can get to Detroit this weekend, find yourself at the Wayne State Law School where we are having our annual conference this weekend. You will be amazed, you will be inspired, and you will feel that you have found exactly what you're looking for that you may not find here in Ann Arbor. And I went to school here. I have maybe a different perspective than other black people who have come through this campus, but I can connect with you and say that you have to look a lot deeper to find a place that you can really feel like it's home. It's made for you and the work that you want to do. And those 3 organizations, I think, is where you should start.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Brush. I'm born and raised east side of Detroit.
All right, east side.
Hey,
Wayne
east
State
side.
Law School. I spent about 4 years recently working around the country on what we call prison reform. My goal was to convince state legislators and local people not to build any more prisons. And it was a very frustrating experience. Number one, I found out state legislators don't want to hear anything about prisons because you all can't vote, for one thing. And you're not going to vote for a long time. So it was very hard talking to them about the evils of prison. The only thing that appealed to them at all was telling them how much this was costing all of us.
That's
keep
right.
These prisons going.
That's right.
But then they came back and they said, but it means jobs. Because we can build prisons, usually out in the country a ways, where they need jobs. And prisons provide full-time jobs with benefits. And so that means votes for them. So it's so difficult to get through to them at any level. But money was one of them. So I shifted to how can we keep people from going back into prisons? And one of the things that at least I discovered was one of the biggest factors was, were the prisoners able to maintain contact with their family and their community once they were on the inside?
That's right.
I think it's getting harder and harder, because if you want to go visit someone in prison, you've got to do it through a television screen.
Right.
I mean, you could, the same visitation could take place if you were 500 miles away. The same thing is happening in the courtrooms. More and more arraignments are being held by television. So it's just this impersonal screen that's being dropped. And when people can't talk to their families because the telephone business is rigged inside the prison, so they have to pay
That's right.
exorbitant fees to
That's
talk
right.
on the
Talk
phone.
about that.
And if they can't visit with their children and their families because of this barrier they've placed there, I think it just adds to the isolation of the prisoner who needs anything. They need contact because they're isolated where they are. So the people we're not talking to, who are not listening to us, are the people who make the decisions. It's not the warden, it's the state legislators who control the purse. And those are the people that we really need to convince that this road that we're going down, there is no hope.
That's right.
You're just going to keep throwing more money at it and making prisoners, blaming the whole problem on the prisoners. So, one of your studies ought to be state legislators and governors, because that's where those are the people whose minds you have to change. And right now, they look at this as a problem they don't want to deal with. They're just nothing but a bunch of bad people. And why should we spend any money on them? And that's the reason why you can't visit the way you used to visit, because it costs the prison more money to have a guard sit with the prisoner or in the nearby when they're going in for a visitation. They don't have to do that anymore. Lastly, somebody mentioned the prosecuting attorney. I think one of the biggest problems are the prosecuting attorneys who overcharge people.
That's right. That's right.
And that's where it all starts.
That's right.
Is they overcharge them, knowing they couldn't get a conviction of that charge, so they'll negotiate a plea. I don't know what your statistics are, but
You are spot on.
Yes.
Spot on.
Go
my
ahead.
research says, we don't try many criminal cases anymore,
That's right.
because you're pressured into negotiating a plea.
Pleading.
And I swear, there are people who are pleading guilty to offenses
That they didn't do.
didn't commit.
Say it. Say it.
Because
Yep.
their attorney
You don't have any
says,
choice.
if you don't plead guilty, you're gonna get put away for a longer time.
That's right.
So, yeah. It's the system is, start with the legislature and the prosecuting attorneys,
Yes.
because I think then you'll get some movement.
Take comfort and solace in knowing that the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar, our numbers are increasing in terms of the cases that we take to trial. We are so sick and tired of Kim Worthy's bullshit.
Go ahead, attorney. Go ahead, attorney. Go ahead.
We look prosecutors in the face when they tell us, if your client holds the exam, we're going to increase and amend the charges. We say, do it. Do it.
Go ahead.
Do it. Because if you don't, it will never stop.
That's right. That's right.
Man,
Somebody has to gum up the system.
Yes.
Coming up.
By insisting on a trial.
We need to put different people in office. That's
right.
something you can add
That's
to your
right.
list too, young man.
That's right.
We need to get on our feet and stomp and put different people in office. There's no way in hell that Kim Worthy should still be in office.
You better say it. You better say it. You better say it.
We have time for a few more questions. Ashley, the mic is right there, right? And there's an audience member who's had her hand up right there for quite some time.
Please
and then,
give it to her.
Okay, so we'll do three more. And before we do that, I just wanted to ask you all, first of all, thank you for coming. Remind you all that our next event is our next panel in this series is going to be Wednesday, November 7th at 5:30 to 7:30 here. So we hope you'll be back. And we also hope that you will sign your name and indicate that you were here on one of 2 sign-up sheets that are at both exits from this room. So, okay.
I'm Mary King. I'm with the Michigan Council on Crime and Delinquency, and I just wanted to say how inspired I've been this evening by both the panelists, but also the comments from the audience.
Yes.
And my dream and hope for what got launched tonight is that there will be greater collaboration between folks in the community who've been doing this work as advocates, as researchers, as policy wonks, as people who have been doing direct services, that there'll be greater collaboration between the work that we're doing and the University of Michigan. And I've been hoping for this kind of connection for a really long time. Right here in this community, we have American Friends Service Committee that you've heard about. We have Nation Outside, the voice of formerly incarcerated people, of which Ron is a member. We have the Michigan Council on Crime and Delinquency. We have the Church of the Incarnation. There are people who have been doing this work for many, many years in this community, and here's a fantastic opportunity for us to partner and move the work forward together. Thank you.
Ashe. That was good.
Please give it to that lady. Please. Forever.
I just want to speak up on behalf of persons with severe mental illness.
Yes.
Because what has happened over the last several 10, 20 years with the closure of the state
mental health hospital. That's right.
For people with severe mental illness.
That's right.
We've never replaced that with some adequate treatment.
That's right.
For people with severe mental illness. And so they're ending up in the prison. One reason that we're having an increase in the prison population is because we have a breakdown in the system for treating people with severe mental illness.
Sure do.
And they don't belong in the prison. They belong in a treatment facility, and they need to be treated. They don't need to be punished.
That's right.
So I just want to speak up for them. I hope that in the future that you will take that into consideration and also maybe involve the Department of Psychiatry in
Oh, that's
future,
a good idea.
That's a great idea.
panels.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The running microphone.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Hi, my name is Tanya. Thank you all so much for what you shared and for giving us the directive to do the things that we need to do. I am a PhD student in the School of Education. I'm also on the Student Rights Project, which is a collaboration between the School of Social Work, the School of Education, and the law school to stop students from being expelled and suspended and then being pushed into the prison system. And as I just wanted, I think I have more of a comment than a question, and I'm sorry for that because I would want to ask you all kinds of questions, but I also am, I'm the only person in my family who doesn't have a felony, so also this impacts in such important ways, and this is the first time that I've actually been able to hear so many people talk about incarceration in a way that most of the people that I know at the University of Michigan are not able to talk about. They don't know, they don't understand what it's like. And I really appreciate, Mary, your analogy of the blob, and then also what you all have been talking about following the money. And one thing that I've noticed is when I try to get in contact with my family, it is so privatized, it's unreal.
That's right.
So every single thing I have to purchase. You have power in prison if somebody puts money on your book so that you can then call your family. You give them stamps. So it's not, it is one thing to think about our votes. Our votes absolutely matter, but it's not enough to stop there. And if people are really thinking about how they can do research to make it matter, following the money to start digging into who are the people who are pressuring folks in the in the legislature to be able to implement these new applications where I can send money to my loved ones and whatever, because like Mary said, this is a blob. This is how the carceral state continues to manifest. And we have to be on top of it. We have to be better than the people who have the money to be the best. And they're really effing good at it. Really good at it.
Yes, they
so
are.
I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's really important to think about what we're doing to black and brown people, absolutely. But also to say that this is impacting all of us. This is all of our problem. And
That's right.
I just am so grateful that all of you are willing to put your voices out there
that you're inspiring, that you're using and leveraging your voice and your experiences so that all of us can get on this, because it's going to take all of us to do it. And we all have something that we can bring, right? We all have a gift. We all have something that we can add to it. A researcher, this voice over here that I've kept hearing, holler, keep hollering, right?
Yes.
Because it's going to matter. So,
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Audrey. I'm from the Bronx originally. I'm a PhD student in American culture. And I actually, so in 2013, I worked at Rikers Island. I was teaching young males creative writing, really anything, Marcus Garvey, whoever. At some point, because it is, for the most part, they just needed the education. But one of the things for me, I interned with Friends of Allen Academy. It's been around since 1984. I don't know if anyone knows it. It's based in New York City. And one of the things that we were doing was specifically around trying to get these young males to be able, through this like 12-step program, be able to, reflect on what got them there in the first place. And to me, that was very ironic. And I was an intern, so I was able to have the opinions that I had, because I wasn't still getting a paycheck from them. But for me, it was ironic because I had one of the students that I had, I was trying to get him to like go through the workbook, and he didn't even know how to read. Damn. So when we think about going, volunteering into these, into these jails, it is really important that you do that. But also remember that like there's an entire system that we keep talking about here that starts alienating these kids from a very, very, very young age.
Come on.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the main things that I want to mention. The other thing is that I have a friend, a white friend, great ally, who's wealthy, who started in Massachusetts, just contacting other friends that she went to college with, who she knows also, are trust fund babies, like we say, people who have money, families have money. And one of the things that I want to challenge, any of you sitting here today, standing here today, listening to all these amazing and powerful stories, is to think about like when you were asking about, think about your privilege, right? One of the things that you can start doing is look around in your classes, look around, or even in your clubs or whatever it is. If you see, if you know, and you yourself is someone who comes from money or has a trust fund or whatever it is, think about the ways that you can actually reallocate that money, right? And that could be like creating, what do you call this, a jail bill fund, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Creating tap into these people. Like obviously they have these resources as well, along with Ashley Lucas, Professor Thompson. And so think about these ways that you can also reallocate resources. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're, if you can't afford to like volunteer at a prison, local prison, then go ahead and just talk to people around you. Even talk to your families, like you were saying, right? And tap into that money that you have, that you feel probably guilty about having, and find ways to actually reallocate those resources. It is important, right? Like money does talk, and even if it's just like putting money in someone's books, like that does make a difference in someone's life, at least that day.
That's
so
right.
Think about that too.
That's good.
Can I also add the bail fund? There is one set up through the Detroit Justice Center with Amanda Alexander, and they have they've had a significant impact in the Detroit area, and I wouldn't be surprised here as well, but I don't know for sure. But I can speak for the impact they've had in Detroit. They have helped keep families together and helped keep criminal defendants their jobs. So bail money is imperative, and if you have extras to give, that's where you should give it.
Okay, we do have to wrap up, but we have burning hands, so we'll do two. You, and then Ava has had her hand up for a while, and then we're going to be done. Okay.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm
Hi,
a
Meg.
PhD student in English and Education, which means I wear many hats, but my favorite one, the one that I look the best in, is educator. And while I'm not in the classroom right now, I will be next year. And I love the question, what is the role of higher education? To me, it's pretty simple. Ask, listen, do, rinse, and repeat. And that's asking with you, listening with you, and working with you if you'll have me. And so I feel like my question takes some time. And Monica, I feel like I owe you one. So I will come to you, and if we could design a class together, readings, lessons, projects, boom, if you'll have me, I would love to design that class with you.
Let's do it, Megan.
But if y'all have some ideas, I would love to listen now so that I can like work with your ideas, because I have some. Anyway, that's my question. Thank you so much for your time and your money and your efforts and your love. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm
Hi.
17. I don't know, I really don't have any, I guess, authority on this topic, but so, and this is my mom over here, Professor Thompson. So, of course, growing up, this has been an issue I've heard about all my life. That's been really near and dear to me. So actually, and I'm in the process of applying to college. I don't know what I want to major in. I absolutely have interest in public health, so that's super interesting to me to hear you speak about that. But so I'm doing my senior year project kind of thing we have about juveniles in the prison system, perhaps just because, I don't know, I don't want to say it's more relatable because I'm not, but you know, it's more relevant, I guess, to me. And I think what was brought up over here, I believe, this woman brought it up, the mental health, lack of mental health care, especially for children, because something that I have found in my research, you know, and also personal anecdotes, is that certain behaviors of children are being criminalized, right? So perhaps the child who decided that it would be like, you know, maybe a kid with ADHD, someone who doesn't, you know, doesn't do well paying attention sometimes, you know, so this is an instance I read about, wrote in Sharpie on the school desk, right? I mean, we're talking third grader, and this kid was punished for defacing school property. And that's just a minor example. I think typically, and this of course exists in adults, but in children, things like generalized anxiety disorders, just depression, that exist typically before they, you know, get into the system, typically are the cause for certain behaviors, especially in children. When you are having certain, you know, things going on and you don't know how to properly express them, don't know how to deal with your emotions, don't know who to talk to, and you end up kind of in these behaviors that are suddenly criminalized, it creates, in juvenile systems that also have a lack of medical funding, just really, they get worse and they get worse and they get worse, and if these kids get out, they're untreated illnesses, and they end up reoffending, or they end up, you know, reoffending. So it's super interesting to me to kind of connect those conversations of mental health and also higher education and children being incarcerated. I guess that's a comment, I don't know, but
yeah, it's important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, on that point, and I think it's a critical point in terms of juveniles, that becomes the entry point into the pipeline. And so, you know, and that was pretty much my whole adult life has been trying to figure out how to be a problem solver in those places and spaces. And what I found is that in many communities, when children are behaving or acting out, the go-to is to call the police. That's the go-to, whether it's school or in the community. And one of the things that we instituted through what we call the multi-systemic approach was to be able to use this therapeutic model to engage every aspect of that child's life so that the last call was the police. And what we find is a lot of times, especially with male children, when they're afraid, when they have experienced trauma, a lot of times it manifests as anger. And then especially if you're a child of color, then that becomes a criminal offense when all you've experienced was trauma and it needs to be addressed and possibly supported. The other thing we need to take note of is that our children are being given psychotropics, and there is no research that says that it's okay to give psychotropics to children. So I've had children that are climbing the walls, exhibiting aggressive behavior, all because some doctor decided to be able to address it instead of giving parenting classes or coping skills or other methodologies to medicate a kid and give them something that's really making them behave in these manners. And then the next thing you know, they're in jail. And then if you're low income, you don't have the attorneys and the psychiatrists showing up to advocate for you. And so I just don't want us to sort of gloss over that point. It's a critical point, and thank you for doing that research.
Good.
I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I'm going to make one shameless plug before I dismiss you, because we talked a lot about families tonight and the impact of incarceration on families. I wanted to let you know that I'm doing a one-woman play that I've been performing for the last 14 years called Doing Time Through the Visiting Glass. It's at the residential college here on campus at 701 East University in the Keene Theater downstairs at 7 p.m. this Friday. Wow. It's free, it's open to the public. If you want to make sure you get a seat, I can tell you the web address to register for your free ticket. But even if you don't do that, if you want to come and talk about what prisons do to our families, you are most welcome there, 7 p.m. on Friday night. Please sign in so that we know that you were here. Your signature helps us to show the university how many people care about the issues we discussed tonight. Please join me in thanking Ruby Tapia and all of our beautiful panelists tonight. Thank you all. We hope you'll join us again in November. Good night.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm sorry for like shoving this stuff.
Come on, Monica, get in there.
And they can oppose it, but it's not them to give it. It's the judge deciding.
See, you think you got so much to say?
Prosecutors can oppose it after a certain age, but even before a certain age, they can't oppose it.
He was over 20, he was in the 20 with the new height.
Oh, the prosecutor can oppose it, but the judge is the ultimate.